All right, guys. Woke up this morning to a surprise. So we know one of the two infantry commanders that are coming out. William Wallace is I assume the Wheel of Fortune commander, right? Usually designed for open fielding. So I think for most people that heard of the same, they know him from Braveheart, movie that came out in the '90s with Mel Gibson, and in that movie he had this like long flowing hair, paint all over his face, a giant broadsword. So he looks a lot different here, right? But I don't think we're necessarily here for the aesthetics. We're here for how this commander is going to change the game. Okay, so we're going to start out, talk some big picture. I'll go over the skills. I actually do want to cover the Smite tree, which is also released at the same time. And then we'll kind of wrap it up with some more big picture stuff. So big picture for me, this commander is not as good as Luce. But I do think he is essentially a open fielding better version of Gorgo for open field, right? So where would I put that? I would actually probably put that on par with about Scipio, right? Obviously it's a single target commander, but the damage factor manipulation of this commander, in my opinion, is going to be closer to Luce, like on par with Luce, even though it's actually only a single target commander, whereas Luce is a 5-target AoE commander. I think if you're a younger player, right? So right now you don't have any of the in-game infantry commanders. You're figuring out where to go with this. I think the first and best is still going to be Luce, and then you just go directly to William Wallace. This March, in my opinion, will be the best March in the game. Better than Gorgo Luce, better than Luce Alex, better than Scipio Luce, and it's kind of cool because the way they designed this commander, I don't think the second infantry march is going to be that broken, right? There was actually a fear I had. I talked about this in multiple streams and videos, that if Lilith came out with another smite damage commander, there's a very real possibility that the second infantry march is actually going to be better than the best cavalry march, and maybe even better than the best archer march. I don't think that's going to be the case. Okay, so let's actually go over the skills, and then we can put this into more context. Okay, so active skill, single target 24 smite damage factor, and then if you're getting attacked by the enemy, you could actually deal an extra smite damage up to 3 enemy troops, so that's 300 damage factor each. Just quickly, if you guys don't know this, the white damage you see on the screen, all right, every turn, that usually comes out to about 400 damage factor, depending on the kit of the commander, right? So for this one, if all the conditions are met, you can think, about maybe like 3,300 damage factor for this. Is this skill like really good? I would say it's pretty good, right? If this was skill damage, it would be pretty mid, but because it's smite damage, I would say it's good. And the reason why smite damage is better than skill damage isn't actually so much because of the nature of the damage itself. It's that if you look at a lot of commanders' kits and if you look at the different talent trees, there's a lot of ways to get skill damage taken reduction or mitigation, whereas there's not a lot of ways to get normal damage taken reduction or smite damage taken reduction, right? So it's not so much that smite damage is better, it's that there's not as many ways to reduce smite damage taken right now. Okay, so the second skill, Scots Wahe, maybe I'm just not gonna try to pronounce these anymore, but the most important thing here is that this commander has march speed, right? So Gorgo, for how great she pairs with Luchette, because she doesn't have march speed, some players don't prefer that at all. And also, it really limits the flexibility in which you could pair Gorgo with another commander in the open field, right? You guys probably already know, based on all the testing so far and what people are running, Gorgo only pairs well with Luchette. Like, you don't see Gorgo being run on the open field with any other commander. Partly it's because of the Smite synergy, but also I think part of it is just because she has no march speed, right? So for a commander of infantry, the slowest troop type, to have 20% march speed, that's actually a huge win here. 10% health is kind of low, but it's okay. And because he also, if you look at the expertise, has a way to provide a shield on the active skill. This is not necessarily a very tanky commander, but that march speed and then some more stats is actually pretty good. The third skill is probably the most interesting. When you see it at first glance, you're gonna think it's pretty busted, right? So taking 10% less normal damage, which is also smite damage, is okay. But then if you're dealing a smite damage from a damage factor greater than 1,000. And the reason why they specify that is because if you look at a Gorgo's kit or Lucia's kit, there's a chance to proc smaller smite damage. Those aren't going to count, right? So essentially, if it's going to be 1,000 or greater, you're just talking about the big active skills. There's an 80% chance for that damage to be increased by 40%. Like, that's disgusting, right? So this skill alone is one of the two reasons why I think if you run Lucia, William Wallace, Lucia should be primary, because if you imagine a world where Lucia fires his 5-target AoE, right? And then there's an 80% chance for that 5-target AoE to be increased by 40%. That's huge. That's just huge. Whereas if William Wallace is a primary, right, you get a 2400 damage factor smite damage, and you increase that by 40%, right? It's going to do a lot of pain to one target, but the actual DPS output is not going to be nearly the same. Right now, this does have a 10-second cooldown, so what you're actually looking at is, at best, this is going to trigger every other skill cycle, right? So if you launch active skill, your second commander launches active skill, the next time that you launch an active skill, the primary commander definitely won't be able to trigger this again. It might actually be the secondary commander. So you still want Lucia primary, because you want to guarantee that the first time this goes off, Lucia is getting the 5-target AoE increase. But even then, once it starts going, if you're staying in combat, it's not even a guarantee that Lucia's active skill is going to be the one that gets boosted every time, just because of that 10-second cooldown. So that actually does kind of pour a little bit of cold water on it, but still, this is a really good skill. Okay. The fourth skill is probably the weakest, because if you even look at, say, like Gorgo's kit, right? For Gorgo's kit, when you launch an active skill, for the next X amount of seconds, I think you get a 30% normal damage increase. Whereas this, you only get 20% total, right? And in this case, normal damage for a smite commander is going to be smite damage, because normal damage includes white damage and smite damage, whereas smite damage is only smite damage. And then Gorgo's kit, I'm going to go back to that. Actually, just pull it up. All right. Gorgo's kit, who I don't have maxed or even leveled, I think. So she's down here. Right. Her first skill, you could potentially increase normal damage by 10 after you launch an active skill, which is why it's good that she's primary. Her second skill, you could get another 30% increase, right? It basically, there's a 10% proc rate off of basic attack. And then her fourth skill, if you deal smite damage, you could deal 30% more normal damage for the next 3 seconds, right? So if you add all of them up, it comes out to 70%. But these are all conditional, depending on, whether you launch an active skill or do a smite damage, or it's like proccing off of a basic attack. Whereas if you actually look at William Wallace's skill, right, this 20% is guaranteed every time. And then you could essentially count this 40% damage increase for a smite damage as like a 40% smite damage increase, right? 80% of the time, if it's not on cooldown, it's going to trigger, right? So you could potentially trigger 60% here, 70% for Gorgo, but this is a lot more of a sure thing. Whereas for Gorgo, the chances of all 70% proccing together is very, very low, right? Finally, this expertise is actually kind of crazy. I don't think we've ever seen anything like this, right? So if this commander launches an active skill or is slowed, right? So Lucia slows with his active skill, William slows, Hua slows, right? If any of those hit this commander, automatically it's 1,000 damage factor mighty shields, right? Like, that's pretty crazy. Now, again, this cooldown is 10 seconds. So if it was like 5 seconds, this would be really broken. 10 seconds, it's a lot more manageable. It's actually kind of debatable how good this is, right? I still think it's really good, but if we want to count like damage factor manipulation, right? If this fires off of active skill, right, this could actually be 3,000 damage factor, and then William Wallace single target 2,400, and then potentially another 900, right? So you could potentially get 3,300 up here, potentially 3,000 damage factor manipulation down here, or like 6,300 damage factor manipulation. Whereas if you think like Gorgo, 5 targets, 2250, right? Every extra target you hit, you lose 15%. Well, it's like a cross. So for example, if you have 1,000 damage factor, right? If you hit 2 targets, it's actually going to be 850 each when you lose 15%. I do know it doesn't scale all the way up to 5 targets. It either stops at after 3 targets or 4 targets. So basically, you don't like subtract 15% all the way up to 5 targets. I just can't remember off the top of my head right now. It's 3 or 4 targets. Regardless, when you're talking about damage factor manipulation, this commander actually does it a lot more than just the active skill because of that expertise. I think it is still going to be a little bit lower than Luches, and also because there's like 10-second cooldown here, right? You're not counting on this every skill cycle. But regardless, this commander is actually affecting the damage factor a lot more than just what you see with the initial active skill here. So overall, let's actually get to the Smite tree, and then we'll go back and talk some big picture meta stuff. Okay, so at the same time that William Wallace came out, Lilith released the Smite tree. Now, I don't think the Smite tree is that good. Okay, I think it was kind of exciting. Oh my god, it's gonna be a Smite tree, and I think it's actually a good thing that the Smite tree isn't broken because Smite damage is already broken right now. What I would have actually liked to see is that they retool, say, like the skill tree and the support tree, where when you get skill damage taken reduction, you will just extend that to smite damage as well, so that smite damage doesn't get such a huge leg up. But they didn't do that. They actually just released the smite tree. That's not that good, so we'll get into this here. Okay, so here's what the smite tree looks like. Right now, some of these, I think the symbols probably just correspond with something we're already familiar with. So they didn't even bother telling us what they are or how many points go into any of these. But what they did do was define these top 4 skills here. Okay, so let's actually go over the top 4 skills. To the bitter end, where it takes 3 points, every 10 seconds after this commander enters battle, it gains a 2% bonus to all types of smite damage, so up to 10%. This skill is not good, right? Every 10 seconds you're in combat, like, you need to be in combat for 50 seconds to even get the full effect of this. And even when you get the full effect of this, it's only 10%, right? So maybe for rally or garrison, it would make more sense. But for open field, this is like an immediate skip. So number 1 here, immediately skip if you're open fielding. Second skill, thick skin, 3 points to take 6% less skill damage, right? Now you compare that to, say, the support tree with, let's pull up Scipio. Oh God, it's gonna take forever. You pull up Scipio, right? Here, loose formation, 3 points, you actually take 9% less skill damage, and that's actually early on the support tree. So it doesn't force you to take potentially a bunch of stuff you don't want to take to get there. This one, 3 points, same amount of points to get 6% less skill damage. I mean, yeah, so 3% less skill damage taken. And it's actually all the way over here near the top of the Smite tree, right? So again, will I take it if I run this commander as a primary? Yes, but it's just not that good. Fighter or Flight is probably the best skill out of anyone that's shown here, because anytime you deal smite damage, right, the troops you hit, all the troops you hit lose 45 rage. The way I'm assuming this work, right, there's a rage cap, so no matter how much rage you gain in a turn, Lilith is going to cap it at 220. After they calculate whether you hit the rage cap or not, then they're probably going to subtract this 45 rage, right? So you can actually gain like 500 rage in a turn. You can only actually use 220 of it, and then if you get subtracted by 45, right, now that goes down to 175. So this is actually really good. It triggers off of smite damage. So obviously, if you have 2 smite commanders, the primary and the secondary commander's active skill both will trigger this. But also, if you look at, say, something like Luches, the 3rd or 4th skill, right here, whenever you launch a basic attack, 25% chance to actually deal extra smite damage. That's going to also reduce the rage, right? So this is kind of like an instant proc, plus the 2 that you're getting every skill cycle. The rage reduction is actually going to be really good. Does this put it above, say, like the support tree? To me, no. Actually, just looking at the skills, I would actually probably take the attack tree over the smite tree for open fielding. But you know, it is what it is. Smite damage is already pretty broken. I'm okay with this not being that good. Thunderous Smite, usually the top of the tree is like the best skill. This one, 5 points, so that when you deal any type of smite damage, right? So again, the active skill, the primary, maybe the secondary commander, and then also like that Lucha's instant proc I talked about earlier, the smite damage one. 30% chance, which is better than 10%, but it's really not that high, to increase the damage by 10%. This is just not good, right? Because one, it only triggers off a smite damage, so not even basic attack, but it only has a 30% chance to proc, and even when it procs, you're only getting 10%. Like, to me, Thunder Smite just isn't that good, right? So overall, as a whole, this tree to me is very, very mediocre. It's obviously it's better than a skill tree for a Smite commander, but it's worse than the support tree. I think it's worse than the attack tree. Like, if I have to use it, I'll use it, but I'm not necessarily happy with this. So for me, if I was going to pair this commander with Scipio, I would actually run Scipio primary, William Wallace secondary. Definitely for the Lucha, I talked about that 40% damage increase. You want that to go to Lucha's hard target AoE. Lucha will be the primary, William Wallace secondary. I actually don't see this commander right now as an obvious primary to any pairing. Even if you were pairing him with Gorgo, right? You want Gorgo as a primary to get the rage reduction from it. Just I think it cost her, was it 900 or 850? Right, you want, anyways, Gorgo's rage cost reduction to be in the primary. So I actually don't see William Wallace as the primary in any of these combos. Yeah, right here. Cost 900 rage instead of 1000 rage, right? So overall, some big picture thoughts, meta thoughts, if you will. I think this commander, though, is going to be pretty stupid in a rally situation, too, right? I mean, honestly, I don't even know. With how broken smite damage is, you might even be able to use this commander in Garrison, right? Just because like a lot of his kit is focused on being really good against a single target, right? Even that 40% damage increase. When you're in a rally or Garrison, you just want it to be on a single target, right? So it's really good there, right? Like, can you run William Wallace Lucha as a rally without even seeing the GE commander, right? Does this guy actually have a place to play, like a part to play in a Garrison, right? In the last KVK I just had, Attila Gorgo or Gorgo Attila was like a really big thing. Well, if that's one of the best Garrisons in an Artifact KVK, wouldn't Gorgo William Wallace be even better, right? So there's a lot of implications there that I'm not that familiar. Well, I'm not. One, I don't do it, right? So I'm not an expert. I'm really not an expert in anything, but I'm really not an expert in rallying Garrisons, so I don't want to comment there. But that's just where my mind goes. I think Lucha William Wallace will by far be the best March in the game, because if you think Gorgo Lucha is good, yeah, Gorgo Lucha is good. Lucha William Wallace, I think, will be better, right? Now, the problem is what to do if you're going to run two infantry pairs, because there's no clear commander that pairs with Lucha that actually will pair well with each other, right? So like Alex, Scipio, Gorgo, they all just pair really well with Lucha right now, right? If you're talking about the secondary, does Kuang actually make the cut? Is it going to be Gorgo William Wallace as the second best infantry pair? Could you possibly run Scipio William Wallace, right? I think people already tried it, Gorgo Scipio. It didn't really work that well. But will a better open fielding version of Gorgo actually pair well enough with Scipio for it to be a viable second March? I think it'll definitely be viable. Is it going to be better than Kuang Scipio? I would guess it is, just because of that shield. Like Scipio to me has already kind of proven that he can pair well with a Smite commander, right? Because of Luchet. But again, he also doesn't pair well with Gorgo. So I don't know for sure. Like, we have to see the testing. But my initial reaction, if I was gonna run this, the first thing I would try to run with the current options I have is I would actually, if I was running two infantry marches, I would actually try to run Lucha Alex, and then I would actually try to run Scipio William Wallace, and then see how that does on the field. If not, honestly, it'll probably be Lucia, William Wallace, and then I might have to stick with Guan, Scipio, and then get the museum, right? Which I just did not. I can't believe I'm saying this because I there's no way I thought Guam was gonna make the cut. But the way Lilith assigned it, right? They made the best march in the game even better with Luce, with William Wallace, in my opinion. But they also strategically designed this where the second best march for the infantry is not going to be really, really broken. So it's actually, good for them. They did a good job balancing it there. But next step, I want to see what the MGE commander is to see if he could potentially do really well in the open field. And after that, I'll probably release kind of like an updated, it's ninth generation now, kind of thoughts on the big picture infantry meta, how to prepare for it. But I would say if you're a younger player right now, don't invest anything in Scipio. Don't invest anything in Alex. If you're just going to run one infantry march, you just literally want to get to KVK3, do Luchet and William Wallace, and just have fun running around with that march. As far as when I think this commander is going to come out, I saw a video by Ahara about a week ago now. I defer to her as an expert in this. She's always been pretty close whenever she guesses, but in general, new commanders have been coming out somewhere between like 64 to about 90 days, more on the lower side than the higher side, especially recently, right? And then she also noticed a pattern where these commanders would come out coinciding with the MGE cycle in the Chinese servers. Right, so if you look at when the Chinese server MGE for infantry is, I think it was July 15th. And the way it has been going, then 2 weeks later, it'll show up in the international servers, which is what most people that watch these videos are playing in. So if I had to take a guess when you're going to see this commander, it would actually be July 29th or about a month from now, right? So you have about a month to prepare. Is he broken? No. But is that pair with William Wallace, Luce going to be pretty broken? Yes. I would probably put this commander on par with Scipio. I think he's definitely better in the open field than Gorgo, who is already pretty good with Luce. And I don't know. I think it'll be a fun commander to actually see and use. I'm definitely obviously going to invest in him. And this commander, to me, is definitely a step up from Belisarius. So I know the CAF sims are probably not happy with this. It just is what it is. If you watch all the way to this long rant, please like and subscribe to the video. It'll help out a lot. And again, thank you guys for watching, and I'll talk to you next time.